And welcome back to another week at Beyond the Trailer Park. Good to see everybody again. I hope a lot of you haven't frozen in place like some of us might have. It's a little cold in some of the parts of the world right now. And of course, back again with us this week is my wonderful co-host Beth. How's it going over there, Beth?
Howdy, howdy.
Yeah, she's a little cold over there, too, I know. And joining us again, because apparently we just can't get enough of her, is our dear friend, Ms. Ashley, the Mouth of the South. How's it going?
Hey, y'all, it's going very well, and y'all can, send the cold weather back up y'all's way.
Oh, yeah, that's you had to take your flip-flops off, didn't you?
I've had to take flip-flops off and put on 2 pairs of pants and, 3 shirts.
So it was just, in the 60s?
Yeah, it was in the 60s yesterday. Today it was 50s. Well, tonight it's starting to drop to the 20s. And then for, the next 2 days, we're going to be in the tundra, and then on Sunday it's going to be, 70.
Yeah, well, talk to me when it's in the...
That's our high.
Yeah.
Freeze! That's Ashley stays in the house and hibernates all day.
Well,
let's just say the pipes froze at the restaurant last night.
Yeah.
Oh.
That can't be good.
No, it cannot.
Well, and this week joining us again, because we also think she's pretty darn awesome, all the way from sunny California, we have Ms. Rosemary. How you doing?
Hi there, and if you've got any spare snow, you can blow it all the way down here. We need some more. I like the sunshine, but we do need a bit more water. Thank you, Vic.
I would be happy to switch with you for the foreseeable future.
Well, I'm not asking to switch. I quite like the sunshine. Just a bit of snow, preferably overnight, where I'm not noticing it. Thank you very much.
Okay. It doesn't quite work that way.
Y'all can direct the cold weather her way and stay out of Georgia.
Yeah, well, I'm not coming.
I was going to come down and visit you.
I'm not coming down until April, so it's. I hear it's pretty close to shorts weather by April, so.
Yes, bring flip flops and shorts, and you never know. Bring the occasional, just a light sweater.
Yeah, well, actually, I think Dave was telling me that it'll probably be hoodie weather for me, so.
Yes.
Which means you folks will be wearing your parkas or something, right?
Oh, yeah, we will.
Looking
forward to it.
Absolutely. Can't wait for that road trip, man. Well, before we get started, a couple of things I wanted to mention. First of all, we got a couple of 5-star ratings on iTunes, so thank you to those people. I had a Vicky5664, and I don't know how or if you're supposed to pronounce this, but FIRSZT. So thank you to those folks, and I think thank you to Miss Ashley, because by the sounds of it, they're both fans of No Religion Required that decided to come and take pity on me and give me a 5-star rating. So
hey, I'm working it over here.
I know you are. So that's pretty awesome. And I do want to give a bit of an apology to Elsa, who sent us our very first email to Beyond the Trailer Park, and I apologize because no one's ever sent us an email, so I'm sorry I didn't get to reply to it yet because, well, I didn't think to look there. I'll learn. It's okay. So that's the problem when you're new. You're like, wow, somebody sent me email? Well, what do you know? Damn. So thank you for that. And it was to do with our marriage equality episode and talking about LGBT rights, oddly enough, in Australia. because we had our first live from Australia Australian on the show back then, Rosemary.
The Aussies.
Yay! That would be our that would be our Miss Donna Down Under. And actually, it was really cool, Rosemary. Donna was experiencing a thunderstorm in Perth, and we got to hear thunder from Down Under on the show live. It was pretty darn awesome.
Well, at my house, I've still got a house there. I hope it's still there.
What's that, Rosemary?
I still have a house there. I hope it's still there.
Yeah, well, this was about 3 weeks ago, so I think you would have heard something by now. At least I'm hoping. I'm hoping.
I haven't been cyclone, so as long as
yeah, she didn't mention
go past my front door, I'm fine.
Yep. I think too we have just a slight lag with Rosemary, so we'll work through that. No big deal. Excuse me. So, for those of you who maybe don't remember, Rosemary was with us on our very first official show. We had one before that, but that was kind of the pilot episode that nobody really talks about. So, but Rosemary was here with us, and we spent the entire evening talking about sex, and that was fun. So, Rosemary is a retired neuropsychologist, and you started out in Australia, I believe, yes?
This is true.
And I also believe you spent some time, I think it was in Indonesia.
I did that too.
Yeah, so she's a well-learned and well-traveled lady, and we just love picking her brain because it's so awesome. So welcome. So we were going to talk about a lot of things to do with how psychology has factor in religion and religious belief, because for a lot of us, we get raised in a particular religion, and we maybe don't know that there's anything else out there, that there's any other way of thinking or believing, and it can be quite a transition when we kind of figure out that maybe that's not for me, or we may get there in roundabout ways. So, and Rosemary, you're going to be you're working. Forgive me for not remembering, but you're working with the group for secular counseling and such. Yes.
I'm doing some. I'm working as a online counsellor, but I'm not officially allowed to say that, I think.
Oh, okay. My apologies. Okay, but it is something that crops up a lot, not just with people who are looking to transition out of a belief system, but people who are maybe trying to find the right belief system and things like that. So, from your experience, Rosemary, how does where does psychology factor into that kind of thing?
It's a lovely broad question.
Yeah. Feel
It's
free to
basic,
take
I suppose.
wherever you want to go.
It's basic. You're looking at a general, non-judgmental approach to the feelings that people have when they start to doubt their religion. For many people, it's a very uncomfortable process. If you start to doubt something that has been part and parcel of who you thought you were as a person, and who you think you are as part of the social community, then it's not just a matter of looking at your belief system, it's a matter of looking at who you are and figuring out your identity. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at a whole heap of very uncomfortable issues, and the last thing you need when you're dealing with that kind of emotional upheaval is for someone come down on you as if you and suggest that you are stupid, rather than someone trying to deal with what is a difficult problem.
Absolutely.
This is a common problem for people who've never had this problem. If you start off with in a secular community rather than and brought up in a very religious community, it can be very hard to understand what it's like for people who are coming out of a very religious community. And sometimes I see on the net people who've come from that position find it difficult to empathize and appreciate the stresses that people are going through when they're coming out of that. They can't understand why people don't see that their beliefs are irrational. And so you'll get people saying, but you're just stupid. And this is about the worst thing that you can say to people who are going through a doubt process like that, because what it does is make them want to put themselves on the defensive and go back into their defending their beliefs rather than take the uncomfortable position of looking at those beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know when I first became an atheist, and it was very much a light bulb moment for me, and I remember being like, wow, I see it, I understand it now, and I wanted just to tell everybody, and I couldn't understand because I was only 17 too, so I couldn't understand why, if I'm telling you that I figured it out and that I know there's no God and you can give up all that religious crap, and people were like, well, no, I don't know, I believe in God. I'm like, but why? And telling them, well, did you think about this and this and this and this? And they're like, well, that, I still believe in God. And it took me a long time to kind of realize that, well, yeah, I might think I've hit the jackpot and figured out, the what isn't the meaning of life, but not everybody's going to be necessarily interested in that. And that was frustrating, I think, at first. I don't know if any of you two have encountered anything like that, but I think a lot of that was because I was a kid and I was like, I didn't realize that people are going to think what they want to think, and that they're going to look at me like, well, so what? What do you think? Because I was like, I have the answer. I know. It's like, I got it.
Well, I think coming.
You're an adolescent, and adolescents know everything.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem coming out of religion, at least for me, my deconversion started way before the internet, so it was a very solitary endeavor, and it took a good 10 years, and there were some other factors which y'all will find out about a little bit later, but my identity was so wrapped up into my religious beliefs that when I finally realized, I won't say I had a light bulb moment, it was more like a psychotic moment, but when I realized there was no God, there couldn't be, it was like this humongous weight just lifted. And I didn't go running around telling people because, I didn't know any other atheists at the time. I didn't even, and it was hard because, it was like, I won't say a whole new me arose out of it because there are other issues with my bipolar in there, but that's what it does. And if you've never been raised in a religion, people are gonna be like, huh? But yeah, for me it was just coming out of it was just it was a big lift. I didn't feel like a dirty bad person condemned to hell and eternal brimstone and fire.
Now, Miss Ashley, she's Rosemary. You wouldn't know, but she's the youngest of the non-believers among us. She's only very recently come to decide that she's more of a non-believer than a believer. So, what's that been like for you, Ashley?
It's actually been very. It's been very rewarding for me. Having the thought process that if I don't do as I'm told or I'm going to go to hell is something that it was very difficult for me to overcome. I had a hard time saying, oh, okay, well, if I don't do this right, somebody's watching me. Well, once I came to the realization that nobody was watching me, and I was able to just, you know, do what I want. You know, of course, I'm not going to go out and murder somebody, but you know, I was able to live life. It's been very rewarding. My whole world has opened up in the last year. I've met you two, and now a third person, and you know, everybody that I have come in contact with has taught me something. And you know, just the reward of the relationships that I have now, just by giving up one relationship with God, if there was a God. You know, it's been very rewarding for me.
That begs a question, Rosemary. How is it that believers can be so sure that they are having a personal relationship with a non-existent entity? Because that's something that, I mean, I have experienced it back in the day, but now that I'm so far removed from it, I have to wonder how that happens. Do you have any insight on that?
Well, we're not born with a brain that sees everything exactly as it is. We're born with a brain that sees patterns, and we're born with a brain that sees things approximately as they are and makes judgments on the fly. And it doesn't get it right all the time. A lot of the evolutionary changes are towards things that work good enough, not perfectly. And one of the problems with human perception is that it works well enough, but not perfectly. So we make a lot of mistakes, and mostly they work, but unfortunately they don't always. And one of the things that we use for getting along with people is our ability to form groups and social groups. But part of belonging to social groups is also going along with what you're told to do, particularly in childhood. And that's also very important in childhood, because if you don't do what you're told, before you're old enough to be able to critically examine reality, you're more likely to get yourself killed. So there is an evolutionary advantage to believing exactly what you're told when you're young. And unfortunately, this is one of the roots of the dysfunctional aspects of socialization, including religions and ideologies and prejudices and social conformities that may help you get along with your particular group, but will lead you to make war on people who are different.
Yeah.
So and that's part of the problem.
I can see, too, because in history, we were a localized, much more tribal people, because you could be born, live, and die, you know, within just a very few miles of one place and never meet anyone who wasn't, you know, fundamentally like you. And so I see it, too, as kind of a bit of a side effect of the speed of globalization. And like, I think we'll get there, but it's a tough thing when, you know, your grandmother never left her hometown and suddenly, you know, you can get anywhere in the world you want for a short stay and come back, you know. Makes it tough.
Developmental change is necessary for getting from one intellectual stage and one moral stage to the next. And if you're confined to an environment that doesn't challenge you, then you don't grow, and you don't grow beyond the elementary stages of either your thinking, or your moral development. This is the more the more civilizations progressed, the greater our ability to be challenged has become. As we've developed the printing press, we have a much wider society. We now have the internet, so we have international stuff as well. So this has changed how we understand morality, how we understand ideologies, and we understand how we relate to other people.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. It makes it tough too, because you'll find, and I don't know if the rest of you have experienced that. Luckily, I didn't really, but a lot of people will experience that the adults, be it parents or grandparents or guardians or whomever, they experience this real desire to prevent any growth outside that sort of core family unit. Like, for a lot of families, the idea that a child would leave that and grow beyond that is very scary to them, I find.
I think you put your finger on the main reason why people want to stay in belief sets like that is it's comforting. It's socially cohesive. It builds community, and it makes you feel that you belong. It gives you an identity. You start messing with that, and your whole concept of who you are and how comfortable you feel and where you belong is upset. If you have no group around you that is going in a similar direction, and you have a personality that finds it where it's important for you to feel that you belong to other people, then this is a really uncomfortable time.
Yeah. Yeah, Beth, that must have been a big one for you, being your family's fundamental background.
Well, it was and it wasn't. Thankfully, my parents really... I didn't experience so much in that way. There were some things, but my parents were pretty open. I think they were of the older mindset. Now, you have to realize my mom just passed, but they're both... Well, my dad's almost 90, but they're a much older generation. But for them, it was pretty much, they let my brother and I go our ways, and every now and then they'd try to reel us back in. But where I see it is within the homeschool movement, and specifically the Christian homeschool movement, because there are some that do homeschool for other reasons, but especially in the patriarchal movements and the quiverful movement, but where homeschooling is pretty much tantamount. And then you jump from K through 12 homeschooling up to a school like Liberty, I hate saying university, or Patrick Henry College. I mean, they're going from one isolated ideology into another one, and that's specifically why Patrick Henry was started.
There was,
Go ahead. I was going to say, which is surprising, because it was last year, Patrick Henry actually had Mikey Weinstein from Military Religious Freedom Foundation come and talk, and he said in an article afterwards that he had quite a few kids come up to him and ask him questions. I don't remember specifically towards what thing, but that was a big step for Patrick Henry to bring in the quote enemy.
Yeah.
I mean, I know when I was in college, what really started me off, and I went to a Christian college. I was studying to be a minister. In my one philosophy class, we had to read Age of Reason by Thomas Paine. And looking back at it now, it's kind of like, did they realize what they were doing?
I don't think they.
It kind of blows my mind, because it's like that book, that one book, is what started me starting to question things. And there's, a couple people we know that same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I didn't have that isolation that a lot of people get, and my parents were a little bit more worldly, but I do know people that have been totally isolated because they were homeschooled.
And I know, Ashley, you've had some impact from your change.
I'm sorry.
I said you've had some family impact from your change too.
Yes. Yes, I have. My son, to be exact. He his whole life, and I played a huge process in it. He didn't know anything other than Baptist religion, and he didn't know that there's a Pentecostal. He didn't know that there's Catholic. He didn't know that there's Lutheran. But here in the past year, I have since gone to him, and I actually apologized to him. Because I saw him coming up the same way I did. And when Rosemary made the statement about the identity of someone, I was just thinking the other day that my whole family belonged to a church here in Savannah. My great-grandparents went to it. My grandparents went to it. My parents went to it. I went to it. My siblings went to it. My aunt went to it. It was the family church. And I remember thinking about the competition between the Baptist church. I would try to go to a different Baptist church, and it was almost like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe you're going to a different church. And it was almost, they were scared that I was going to find something else out than what my church was teaching me. And yes, I've had several statements from my mother. I've been, when I was studying or when I was practicing Buddhism, I was told, oh, it was a horseshit religion. I'm sorry, but those were her exact words.
Okay, and you can swear here all you want.
Okay. You know how long I've been bottling that up?
So, Rosemary, Ashley's show just went PG-13, so she has to mind what she says now.
Oh my goodness!
Not here. We like our NC-17. Thank you very much.
But I began thinking, especially when my church, even down to the church that I belong to, became my identity.
Yeah.
And that's how people knew. Oh, she's the one that goes to to such and such church. Oh, she's the one that goes to this church. And then it finally hit me the other day that the reason why my grandparents or my parents were always like, well, why are you going to this one? Is because they were scared that I was going to find something else out.
Mm-hmm.
Other than what my church
was. What do you do then with your friends and your family who have an identity as belonging to that church? Suddenly, you're the odd one out. You don't belong anymore. So you threatened your family. You threatened your friends. You suddenly said to them, "Okay, I don't belong here anymore. I'm not one of you." And
I get told that I think that I'm better than everybody.
See, I went through that aspect when I was raised Lutheran. I went to a Wesleyan Methodist college, but I converted, I guess for lack of a better word, to Pentecostalism. The whole speaking in tongues things. And when I started questioning things, I was probably around 22, 23 when I eventually said I was leaning towards agnosticism, and any little doubt that I brought up, any little question that I brought up, it was just like, talk about ostracization.
Yeah.
The whole thing is, oh, you're not the right... I know before I knew I had bipolar, it was, it was a spiritual issue. You weren't right with God. You didn't pray enough. You didn't study the Bible enough. Or you weren't, my favorite one, you weren't the right type of Christian. And I know a lot of atheists who have deconverted have basically have been told, well, then, and I think you're going to touch on this, you weren't a true Christian.
I was going to say, you're going to love my logical fallacy later.
Yeah.
You set it up so nicely for me.
I mean, and I know, like, Dan Barker from Freedom from Religion Foundation, he got this a lot, and I know a couple other ministers have had this shoved in their face recently. Obviously he wasn't the right type of Christian.
Ryan Bell, I would say.
Yeah, Ryan Bell I couldn't think of his name. I was confusing him with Rob Bell, and I knew it wasn't Rob. But, and that is just so infuriating. I mean, even looking back on it now, I mean, we're going back a good 20, 25 years, and it's just like, just that, I mean, at my girlfriend's funeral back in '88, I was actually told by members of her church, and she was Pentecostal at the time, that I had no right to grieve.
Yeah.
That's the mentality. I mean, but I did not get that from my parents. That was after I left the fold, so to speak. And yes, converting to Pentecostalism did not go over well.
Yes, you mentioned that you did some training for the ministry. Which one, may I ask?
Well, I was at a Wesleyan Methodist college, but at that point I was kind of in between converting to Pentecostalism, but I was looking more at non-denominational because I wanted to work with alcohol and drug abuse with children. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay.
I was,
did you know that I spent a year doing the same thing at trained to be a Methodist minister? So we have that in common.
I think a lot of us have that in common. I always say I learned a little bit too much in my Bible and theology class.
Yes, I read the Bible. That was my problem too.
My problem for the last year.
I love it. I just have to say I love it.
And what's your favorite verse?
Yes, Miss Ashley, what's your favorite verse?
Favorite verse?
Ezekiel. Oh, Lord, hold on. Yes, I just called on the Lord. Talk to me. My mind just went blank. I told you I was going to put it up on my wall.
It's the one about donkey dicks.
Yeah, it is the one about donkeys. I know what it's about.
Ezekiel 23:20.
Yes, that's it.
Yes. And she lusted after her lovers, whose members were like that of donkeys, and whose emissions were like that of horses. Yes, that's the one.
Come to the house.
I don't know. I'm sorry, but that verse reminds me of Susan Westenhofer. She's a lesbian comedian. And she was doing her little thing, and it was about her girlfriend at the time, and who was like really quiet, and something happened. I don't remember the whole gist of her story, and it came down to like just out of nowhere, her girlfriend goes, "Well, that sucks, donkey dick." So that verse, the Ezekiel verse always reminds me of that.
Hey, I can't even say the word donkey without chuckling, okay? You know how many times the word donkey is in the Bible?
On the Bible study, the Yeasty Bible study, donkey came up and you just about lost it. It's like I broke Miss Ashley.
There's never look. Driving through the country, going on road trips, I look at a donkey and I'm like, really? This is not good. I can't even look at the donkey.
But you know what I just realized is kind of funny is they make such a big deal about Jesus riding the donkey into Nazareth.
I was just thinking that.
What's that, Rosemary?
1 or 2 donkeys.
He only had one. I guess, I don't know.
Which version?
As far as, oh, good point.
2 stories. One of them was writing 2 of them, and one of them was writing 1. And if you look at the Old Testament, one of the Old Testament stories is about the prophecy appears to be about 2 donkeys. If you don't understand the Jewish method of repeating information to stress it. So when you get hold of a Greek person misinterpreting the Jewish Old Testament, then that's when they try to redo the story, and suddenly the second story in the Gospels has Jesus riding on 2 donkeys instead of 1 to try and make him fit what they thought was the prophecy in the Old Testament, which is one of the reasons why you can argue that the stories in the New Testament were not based on first-hand experience. They were hearsay, or they were made-up stories. They were stories that were made up to try and make a point, to sell a to sell a religion.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the world's oldest game of telephone.
Oh, it's worse than that, but yes.
That's being kind.
It's motivated telephone.
Yes, that's true. So you've got the avenues where people just fucked it up, and then you've got the avenues where people are like, no, I'm going to fuck you up with this shit.
The point is, though, and this really should be stressed, is that these people were not aware that they were lying. They thought they were telling the truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need to look at what goes on in courts of law, where people are providing evidence that they think is the truth.
Yeah.
The reason why the judge doesn't stand up and send them all to jail for contempt of court when their testimony is found not to match up to what the forensic scientists discover, is that people are not aware that what they think is true is very often not exactly what went on.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, as I said before, your brain isn't perfect, and it doesn't see everything that's actually there. You come in with an idea of what you think you should see, so your attention already is setting you up for ignoring stuff.
Yep.
So you'll see what you think is there, and your brain will start to put bits and pieces together. And so you will see stuff that isn't quite there, and you will ignore stuff that is there, and you will make a model of reality that fits what you expect to see. And therein is the problem. This works pretty well most of the time. But if you're wanting to look at what you're wanting to make absolutely sure that what you saw is actually what is there, that's when you have to start doing sophisticated measuring, and that's where your scientific method comes in, because systems like that are designed to undo what we now discovered are the failings of the brain and the perceptual system.
And I would say that the more highly motivated that you are to see or hear a certain thing, you are far more likely to see what you are wanting to see in the first. Like you've heard that, where you only see or hear what you want to see and hear, and that is largely true. I know, Beth, that, well, all three of us ladies have done ghost hunting in our day, and I'm sure we have all come across things where, we really, really want that orb to be a ghost, and you squint and you look and you're like, oh, I think it looks different from the other orbs, and maybe that's not a dust specker, and ooh, maybe just, ladies, am I right?
You are right.
Well, our brains are set up. The brains are set up to detect patterns, and they're also set up to build our understanding of reality on and build it onto what we already know. And of course, we have to trick our brains to get beyond that sometimes. But I can think of a case in point. From my window here, I can see the Oakland airport. And about a year ago, they built a new tower because the old tower couldn't see. There are actually two airports. There's a big airport for the big planes, and there's a small airport at the back for the smaller planes. And due to somebody's mess up, somebody built a big hangar, FedEx actually, in between the two airports, so that the tower that could see the front airport couldn't see the planes at the back airport. So they had two of these towers. So they decided they'd build another one, a big one in the middle there where they could see both airports. Now, while they were building this, they had a big crane up there that looked most interesting. And I remember saying to my neighbour down the road there, now what does that look like? What are they doing there? And she said, oh, that's a cross. They're building a church. Now, she's a fundamentalist Christian. And, of course, that is what her brain is set up to see.
Wow.
I think so.
Glad for you that was not the point of the reason. Yikes. Let's take a quick break here, and we'll go and have a look at this week's creation moment. So, ladies, if you need to powder your noses, now would be a good time. And I think this week's is about 7 minutes long. So let me do that whole screen share thing here. I'm trying to smooth this process out a little bit more here. Come on, computer. Okay, there we go.
Hold the atheist's nightmare. Your well-made banana is just the right shape for the human mouth. Chewy, easy to digest. It's even curved for the face. It's just so much easier.
When we understand that creation is the truth, then we understand where all of our doctrine comes from as well.
There actually is a book out there that actually tells us where matter came from. Bill, I do want to say that there is a book out there.
Next time you hear on television somebody say millions of years ago, what's the question we're going to ask them? Were you there? Were you there? Call them up on the telephone and say, excuse me, Mr. TV man, were you there? Only way we could know what happened in the past if someone was there to tell us. That's right, dinosaurs lived beside people. And of course you'll have an evolutionist who'll say, that's not right, dinosaurs lived millions of years ago. What do you ask them? Were you there?
Hello and welcome to this week's Creation Moment. A little slice of creation silliness I get in my email every day, and I'd like to share it with you so that we can all get a taste of just how crazy creation shit is. This week, Ian Taylor tells us about the goings-on in the jungle. What does the jungle have to do with creationism? Well, let's find out.
According to evolution, biological history is one of red in tooth and claw. In this view, living things compete with one another. The fittest survive at the expense of the less fit. In a forest, this means that trees compete with one another for light, water and nutrients. Taller trees benefit from the light. They prevent shorter trees from receiving. But as it turns out, the true law of the jungle is cooperation.
Are you shitting me? Cooperation? In the jungle? Just what planet are we talking about here? But first of all, let's address this. Survival of the fittest. I have said this on Creation Moments a number of times, but I'll say it again because Ian Taylor doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Quote, survival of the fittest does not mean the most aggressive, the strongest, the biggest bastard out there. it means the traits that are most adaptable to the environment the creature is living in are the traits that will move forward in future generations. So it doesn't mean that everything's always fighting the other species. It just means that some species are more adaptable to the environment than others. You do not have trees trying to kill other trees by growing over top of them. Some trees are better suited to less light. Some trees are better suited to more light. The ones that need more grow taller. The ones that need less stay shorter. It's not rocket science, Mr. Taylor. All right, let's hear what this cooperation crap is all about.
What goes on beneath the forest floor is essential to the forest itself. Tree roots gather water and nutrients from the soil. In addition, fungi live among the roots, feeding off the sap and other carbon compounds produced by the tree. In return, the fungi help make nutrients in the soil available to the tree.
It's called an ecosystem. Things are interconnected. That doesn't mean they're sitting there deciding, oh, well, I'm a fungus and I'm going to cooperate and provide sustenance for these insects. And, you know, the earth isn't going, well, I'm going to be moist now because I want to help my fellow fungus grow. No. Ugh. Let's keep listening.
This picture of cooperation goes even further than this. Researchers have learned that the trees themselves cooperate with one another. This cooperation even exists between species. Researchers shaded some trees, leaving others in the sun. Tagging trees with different isotopes of carbon, they were surprised to find carbon compounds made by the sun-bathed trees turned up in the shaded trees. The trees that were doing well were helping the trees that were not able to photosynthesize, even if they were of a different species. The true law of the jungle turns out to be cooperation. Rather than survival of the fittest, this cooperation between living things reveals a carefully designed creation made by a loving creator.
You really want me to believe that these altruistic trees were giving carbon compounds to the lesser fortunate trees? Are you fucking kidding me? You have no idea how those compounds got there. Who's to say they aren't compounds that are just naturally occurring in both varieties of trees? Hello? Your information doesn't say anything else other than the same compounds were present. Who knows, with some of the stuff you try to pull off on us, anything could be possible. That guy could have made it up for all I know. Really? You really think trees are just like, hey man, I see you're kind of wilty looking there. Have some carbon isotopes, man. 'Cause, you know, I really love ya. Fuck. And this doesn't show that anything was lovingly created or designed. It just means that the ecosystem and symbiotic relationships that were the most beneficial are the ones that have thrived over time. Like I said, the traits that ensure a better chance of survival are the traits that are going to be carried forward. It doesn't mean that, wow, that species of tree lives today because some kind-hearted oak gave them some carbon compounds. Fuck me. The prayer this week is golden as usual. You, Lord, are my helper. Help me to love others and help them as you have loved and helped me. Right? Because obviously you're not a child starving in Africa, because you know how much God loves to help those guys. And amputees, too. He's really not too fond of them for some reason. Oh, and just for fun, the picture that accompanies this week's creation moment is a picture of a lion and a cub eating a Cape buffalo. So I guess that buffalo was really super cooperative and really wanted to make sure that those lions got their food, wasn't he? Yeah, didn't think so. That craziness is this week's creation moment. And there we go. And yes, Miss Ashley, that was the intended point of that photo.
Okay, good. I was looking at it and I was like, so is that how they make baby trees?
Yep. They were sharing some isotopes, man. I swear that guy gets daffier every time I get an email from those people.
You will find a way of rationalizing things.
Oh, I know. There was what was it? Was the whales last week or the week before? I don't remember. There was one where I think it was 2 weeks ago where they were saying how something about whales, that they never evolved from anything, and the fact that there are whales proves God's love for everything. And I'm just like, huh? How does that work? Yeah. It was the whales. The whales glorify God by their existence. That's what it was.
There is a reason why the comment section is often disabled on those kind of videos.
I can well imagine that would be the case. This group, it's called Creation Moment, and actually Dave Foda signed me up for their mailing list. He just one day said, "Hey, give me a throwaway email." I'm like, okay. And then this shit starts showing up in my email every day. And I'm like, thanks a lot, Foda. But no, actually, it's quite funny. And they actually just started up a YouTube channel. So now, like, that's the Creation Moment, which is usually about 2.5 to 3 minutes long. But on their YouTube channel, they now have a Creation Minute, which I haven't had a chance to look at them yet, but they kind of look like they're going to be just as lame. So we'll see.
Well, I have to say that to their credit, they've actually educated me a great deal, because when they come up with something like that, I go away and actually do the research and see whether their claims have any credibility to them. And in the process, I've found out an awful lot of stuff that I wouldn't have otherwise known. The unfortunate part is that not everybody does that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, the very first one that I did pre-recorded, I looked up, they were talking about this golden tree frog and how it had this perfectly planned mating system. You know, God must have been so smart to create this mating system. And I went and looked it up, and they're extinct.
Too well.
No!
God didn't like that creation. Yeah. Handled it. I don't like
the huge numbers of things that are extinct is really a very big black mark against the creationist idea anyway.
Absolutely. And this whole
creator gets them all stuffed up like that.
And this whole idea that, like, everything is just perfectly designed, and I'm like, the majority of the planet actively tries to kill us on a regular basis. This is intelligent. How?
Yeah.
You know, like, we really have to work at being here. You know, that doesn't seem
I think Neil deGrasse Tyson's done the best answer to that one with his video on stupid design. If you want to see one? Yeah, I don't think anybody's done anything better.
It sounds wonderful.
well, what baffles me, going about like what you're saying with that we have a planet that's literally trying to kill us on a daily basis, is that if you think about it, if creation were true or intelligent design were true, then why did we have to literally genetically manipulate things like the banana just so we could eat it, or the tomato?
Because
you know, medical science. If we're perfectly designed, we don't need medical science. We have this whole discipline aimed at fixing what's wrong with our creation.
Yeah, and their whole excuse is, well, that was the result of sin.
Yes.
Oh, I might do that one next week. There was the creation moment, I read too about how this early aquatic dinosaur shows signs of having the bends, and that means that, it used to be perfect until the fall of man, and now it has to have the bends to atone for sin. I'm like, a dinosaur? Are you kidding?
Oh boy, that should be an interesting
problem
one.
With the so-called vegetarian dinosaurs having teeth and claws and stuff. All of that is to rip the leaves off the trees and munch them. Really?
Yeah.
It really doesn't. The whole argument falls down the minute you start to actually look to see what's really there.
Exactly. I know, and they like to play on probabilities, it's like, well, it's just this infinitesimal probability that such and such could happen. I'm like, there's a lot of things in this world that happen that have an infinitesimal probability of happening. It doesn't mean it's never going to happen. Like, come on. People win the lottery, and they have better chance of getting struck by lightning, so,
Well, as a person that had to spend a lot of time learning statistics, that argument's never held water with me, because if you're looking at the kinds of things that creationists talk about, the probability, they have a sample of one. You can't make a probabilistic statement that has any sense at all when you've only got one sample of one universe, one set of life. Sorry, but this is just nonsense.
Yeah.
And one God, really? Where?
Can you tell them to drop by sometime and say hello? Just shits and giggles.
Yeah, just come over for dinner.
They're pulling probability stuff out of. The probability of life on this planet is 100% because it's happened.
It's here. Yes.
And they doubt about that.
I love that, the probability of, life can't come from nothing. It's like, well, what is nothing? Do you know what nothing is? Because I'm not sure I know what nothing is.
Well, the scientific conception of nothing is nothing like, to use a pun, nothing like what the average person thinks of as nothing. So scientists don't believe in nothing, if you understand me. There are things in it. There are energy fields.
Yeah.
And potential energy fields. So if anything's going to be eternal, it's energy. Okay, so if you want to redefine God as energy or the laws of the universe or something like that, fine, go ahead. But that's not what people who are arguing for the existence of God mean when they talk about God.
Because if you say it's energy, I'm pretty sure that he's been on Star Trek a few times then. In which case, he's actually pretty cool.
Probably a singularity.
Both with Kirk and Picard. And Commander Sisko on DS9. They had a whole wormhole full of gods in that case.
Excuse me.
Yes?
Excuse me. What does God need with a starship?
Ask Q. He doesn't. See, in that case, Q is better off than God. Yeah.
Well, let's be scientific and first define our terms. What is God?
Exactly. And everybody thinks it's different. Everybody thinks it's
I
different.
came across something this morning where it was another creationist stuff where I had a list of people thrown at me who, quote, scientists who had Nobel Prizes who, quote, believed in God, so therefore it's supposedly reasonable that I should believe in God as well.
And what fallacy is that, ladies?
Well, I wasn't even bothered about that. My question was, well, are you sure that any of those people had an understanding of God that was at all in any way similar to the one that you have? Because what you may have given me is a whole list of people that don't believe in your God. Where are you going with this?
Oh, I only say that because I did the appeal to authority last week, so that's where I was going with that.
Well, it's both an appeal to an authority and it's also a appeal to false authority. Because I mean, why would scientists, whether they're Nobel Prize winners or not, have the kind of expertise needed to decide that question.
And if it's the list I'm thinking of it, what does a mechanical engineer have to do with creationism?
More than mechanical engineers on the big list of people that believe in creationism that was put out by the Discovery Institute. I think there are about 2 of them were biologists.
Yeah, there's the exact same list. I've seen that list.
I believe creationists are very fond of dentists as well, if memory serves.
Dentists, they have park rangers, they have economists. I don't call them scientists at all, I'm sorry. And
just because they have
other people no relevant background, so they're not even appropriate authorities. And when they're quoting people to support their points of view, what you find, if you look at, all you have to do is look at when they publish their damn papers. It's usually about 100 years ago, 50 to 100 years ago, in an area that's completely irrelevant to whatever they're talking about.
Well, don't you know, you can't trust science because it changes all the time, don't you know?
That's one of my favorites.
That's I always love that one. I'm like, it's kind of the point, you know. Keep looking for new information that we can be more right or, you know, more accurate than we were before. Hello.
Yeah, the point with that one though is that it doesn't actually change as much as they would like to tell you it changes.
No, exactly.
It's more a fine tuning, and not in their sense.
Yeah, not their idea of fine tuning.
We're fine tuning what we've already discovered rather than throwing the whole thing out.
I like how the Earth is allowed to be fine tuned, but science isn't. Oh man, those crazy creationist people. But back to a little bit what we were talking about before. That whole when you're talking about eyewitnesses and eyewitness testimony and unreliability, something that I encountered a lot in my ghost hunting was because I know all the other ladies, you've all listened for EVPs before, and Rosemary, are you familiar with EVPs?
I might be. What's it short for?
That's help me, girls.
Electronic voice phenomena. What it is you take a digital recorder or a tape recorder, you set it down, and it's supposed to pick up the voices of ghosties.
Isn't the what is it, the light noise or something like that?
Yeah. It's so you might get back and just hear like static and stuff, but if you crank it, you might hear noises that you can interpret to be speech, maybe.
Okay. My favorite one is when you're watching the shows on TV, and you hear them, it's like, did you hear that? And all you hear is, at first, all you hear is the blah, 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 blah. But then when they put words to it, your mind thinks, oh yeah, I heard that. But it's only because they put words to it.
Yeah, it's confirmation bias, and they do that intentionally, because what happens is when you listen to an EVP or through a ghost box, which is another method of they use, is that your brain is matrixing, looking, as Rosemary said, looking for the patterns. So, like, I'm like one of the worst persons to listen to EVPs because my hearing is so bad that I can't make anything out. Now, unless it's like dead on clear, it's just all mumble to me. But if somebody gives me a preconceived idea of what it's saying, then yes, I do hear it.
Well, actually, you can't not hear it. So every time you listen to it, then you'll hear what your brain has just started to hear. It's the same with looking at patterns in clouds. You'll see things that make sense to you, and everybody will see things that make sense within what they're familiar with.
Just like what I saw with the tree.
You know, the phenomena of near-death experiences.
Yes.
Now, this is often brought up as something that shows that the, quote, usually Christian God exists. But if you look at this phenomena, it happens across the world. It happens across other religions and other cultures. It isn't confined to the Western world and the Christian religion. So that people who are starved of oxygen and at the point of dying, they don't actually die because of the death is defined as an irretrievable breakdown. So if it's not irretrievable breakdown, then they're not dead. They're just nearly there, which is why the near-death experience. But at that point, the oxygen is knocking back in the brain, and there are other systems that go online and that happen during that time. And what you get is a consistent series of things that happen, including the bright light and the feeling of going down a tunnel and so forth, and the images. But what's interesting about the images is that the images are related to a person's background and what they're familiar with. And so you will not get a Protestant having visions of saints. You will not get a Catholic having visions of Luther or Hindu, the Hindu gods. You will not get a Muslim having visions of Jesus, and so forth and so forth. Each of them will have visions that make sense in terms of what they're familiar with. Now, if the phenomena were actually an experience of something that were real, rather than a hallucination that is using icons that are part of their background, then all of it would be similar.
Yes.
As it is with people who are finding, looking at discovering the laws of the universe. Independently in all sorts of different countries, the laws of science, etc., and that sort of thing are independently discovered by across cultures. But
so if the Mormons were right, then you'd be seeing all those Hindus would be seeing, woo, it's Joseph Smith. There'd be an awful lot of Mormon Indian folk, but there isn't.
So that is a very good argument against any of that being anything other than the brain going into free will and trying to make sense of something that it doesn't really understand by shoving icons and explanations at itself. And it does that in other areas as well. When you've had a brain injury, it does similar sorts of things. It tries to make sense of what it can't otherwise make sense of.
Not traumatic, but when I was 15, I had surgery under general anesthetic, and I vividly remember. I vividly remember having dreams of the time and waking up very disappointed that I was not on adventure with Frodo.
Oh. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, well, I was 15. What did I know? But Ashley, you guys just experienced this whole matrixing thing when you were with Shujin on your last show, and that was so fun playing all that music backwards.
It was.
They were trying to find the devil in the music, and they didn't do so hot.
Backmasking or playing the music backwards.
And I remember a lot of the time, Bobby would ask you, what did you hear? And you guys would be like, I don't know, a lot of mumbling, maybe this. And then he would say, well, it's supposed to say this. And then, now I hear it.
Right, because it was literally put into my brain to hear that. And then the stuff that I actually did hear that he didn't have to tell me, I later found out that the record was made that way.
Yeah.
Exactly, they did it on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's like you're looking at a secret code, and then somebody hands you like the answer key to hold over it, and then it's like, oh, well, now I can see what it says because somebody told me that this is how you figure it out.
You know, and another good example, and I know, you know, because we're all on Facebook, you ever see those things that come across, and it's the not the crossword, but find the word puzzle, and it's like look for the first word that comes to your mind, and it's generally, you know, Jesus or God or something like that. And then, you know, it's because our mind is trained to find words like that.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Mind will pick up on stuff that you're familiar with. You're quite right. Yeah. Yes. I think the official complicated word is pareidolia, if you really want to know.
Yes.
But let's just call it nice and simple. It's your brain trying to make patterns that's familiar to you.
Yeah, and it happens visually all the time. I mean, when we were ghost hunting, we get the pictures and be like, oh, I think that's the outline of a person, you know. If
you later find out it was a tree limb.
Or it's just a bloody shadow of from somewhere, and you're like, oh yeah, I can kind of make out a head, and that looks kind of like arms, and it's like, no, it's a fucking shadow, people. Like,
it's funny bringing it.
Mars now, remember too, not just the man on the moon, but there's even faces on Mars. I've been.
Oh
yeah.
Yes.
I know. Was it last year, or it might have been 18 months or so ago? There was a big brouhaha not too far from where I live, outside of Bradford, which is about an hour north of me, in an alleged sighting of Bigfoot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't remember who exactly it was, which organization, but they went out and went to the area that supposedly it was a fucking tree stump. Mm-hmm. And even after being confronted with the evidence that it was a tree stump, and if you were, you know, back on the road, if I remember correctly, the guy was like, "No, I saw Bigfoot."
Yeah.
It's like.
Well, there's a thing called the cognitive dissonance theory that explains that, and what that basically is that if you're presented with evidence that shows that you're a fool, the last thing you want to do is accept it because that upsets your self-esteem. So you will fight tooth and nail to prove that you aren't a fool.
Like Pastor Manning.
So you have to be fairly secure in your own self-esteem to be able to cope with that kind of contradictory evidence.
Well,
it shows that you've really been hoodwinked.
Mm-hmm.
And this gets to another thing that we haven't really talked about, and that is that, okay, all right, all the people that on this program here have gone through a deconversion process, yeah?
Yes.
All right. Okay, what makes us different from people who haven't?
That's a good question.
Y'all didn't tell me there was going to be a test tonight.
It's open book, Miss Ashley.
Well, I forgot my book.
The question I asked when I was the first professional research project that I did was looking at just that question. Is okay, I deconverted, but most of my colleagues at that stage had not. Why was I different? What made me different? And so I set out to have a look at the members of the Melbourne University Christian Union, and I went back 10 years and chased them all down. I chased as many as I could down. I got a fairly good response. I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't bad. Put them through a whole lot of different kinds of tests. I had some idea about what I might be looking for. And the things that I asked them where they were now, obviously where they'd been before, but I asked a few questions to make sure what were their beliefs in the past. If they belonged to the Christian Union, we had some idea that they were pretty much conservative evangelical, or they wouldn't have belonged to that particular society. And then the next set of questions were, okay, where were they now? did they still believe at all? Had they changed their beliefs, and if so, how had they changed them? Had they be liberalised and gone into a form of a more liberal type of Christianity? Had they taken up a completely different religion, or had they gone into, say, charismatic stuff, which was all the rage back then? This is 30 years ago. Or had they stayed pretty much the same? And then the next thing I did was have a look at the different characteristics that I thought might have something to do with it. So I looked at dogmatism, authoritarianism, conservatism, whether they had moved around a lot or stayed in the same town, whether they'd changed jobs, what kind of... I couldn't really look... I had a brief test of intelligence, but really what we're looking at there at a university population means that we've got what's called a ceiling effect. They're all much the same intelligence, so I'm not expecting to get much of a difference in terms of intellectual stuff, because they're all from the same general bunch, and I didn't. But the big things that made a difference as to whether anybody changed in any direction at all was their scores on creativity and divergent thinking, and that meant that they went just as likely to have gone into full-scale charismatic tongue-twisting Pentecostalism, or given up their beliefs entirely. So that was one of the things. Another of the things that dictated whether they then went into a more conservative way of looking at things, whether they remained within Christianity or they got right out, was a personality thing. So then we were looking at whether they were conservative or liberal, and the conservatism, the measures of conservatism and authoritarianism were a big, huge factor in that. So you're looking at personality and a type of intellectual, I don't like to call it intellectual, a type of cognitive aspect that is part of the difference in why some people change and some people don't. Other factors which you would expect were whether they moved around and therefore moved out of their comfort zone. And that makes sense in terms of anthropological stuff that other people have seen. So if you're and what we know also about changes in you change from one stage of thinking and moral development to another, you need to have challenges. If you're still sitting in the same group, talking to the same group of people in the same city, etc., you're not going to have those kinds of challenges. If you move and you're put with another group of people, you're more likely to. So, not surprisingly, that one was also a factor. Yeah, but not as much as the personality ones, interestingly enough. So there you go. That gives you some idea of why you might have changed. And other people.
Well, I am pretty creative, and I am such a nonconformist that I end up not realizing that I'm not conforming half the time. So it makes sense for sure. And I like the idea too that, you know, once you've sort of been booted out of your comfort zone, then it's easier to adapt to that, and it makes you more adaptable to change that way. And I am that too. So that makes sense. That's really neat. That would be a fun paper to read, I bet.
Well, what I'd like to do, and I've got some hooks into some people who are doing, one person in particular who's doing research in this area, and I'm hooking up with her the next week or so. I think she's back from her vacation now. I want to have a look at other things that might have an effect, such as your self-esteem levels and how important it is for you to how important it is to be liked by other people. Is that a really important part of your factor? Or
that
are you comfortable to
belong
stand outside and be disliked by people?
Yes.
And I would suspect that in this particular society where not having a religious belief is going against the grain, rather than in Sweden where it's probably pretty much the norm, then the personality that can stand outside the norm is going to be more able to shift their beliefs in that direction. So I thought, well, what I'm saying is I think you're going to get a different personality profile of atheists here than you will in Sweden.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. We'll take another little break here, and Beth has done another preview of Havoc and Chaos for us. So I will play that, and you guys can take a break.
Warning,
if you need
I
it
swear.
too.
So if you're offended by four-letter words, you may want to go and listen to something else. Welcome to this week's exploration of the dumb shit stupid smart people say. This week, while trying to decide on what story to highlight, I was torn as to what to choose. So many stupid people, so little time. As per usual, the story seems to have chosen me, and this one hits very close to home and heart. As you will find out, there is only one topic that can raise my hackles more than religious batshittery. In 1993, my life was beginning a downward spiral that I had no control over. All I knew was everything I did was useless. I became socially withdrawn and stopped activities I once enjoyed. I literally became a hermit. Things such as grocery shopping were almost impossible. Sleep was unheard of, and my daily life totally disintegrated. Although there were other factors that figured into the whole mix, hindsight has shown me that my downward spiral was not causing those factors, but the reverse. The pressures of dealing with a chronically ill significant other, financial difficulties, and just the chores of daily living were killing me. The thought of mental illness never crossed my mind. It didn't exist, at least not in a normal way. I was still stuck in the religious mindset I had discarded a few years prior. The fault lay with me. It was something I was doing wrong. So I ignored the symptoms, put on my big girl panties, and carried on with my life. Flash forward. Because of the financial issues, I was seeking help of any kind. The last organization I had visited broke my back and my mind. That was in 1997. And so began 18 months to hell and back. But let me explain. Have you ever watched a movie where the protagonist and the antagonist are fighting, falling through walls and sometimes weakened ceilings, downstairs, eventually ending up in a room where the main electrical supply is concentrated? During the course of their battle, electric lines are broken and sparks begin to fly. The climax comes when the protag does a roundhouse kick to the chest of his foe, sending him backwards into the main panel. That is when shit really begins to get heated. The arcing begins as the antagonist sizzles like bacon, eventually collapsing into a heap of death, in the process taking out the power of the scene of battle. Or, worse, the entire eastern seaboard. Yes, I watch a little too many sappy disaster movies. But that, my dear listeners, is what it's like to have a complete and total psychotic break. That is what happened on that day in 1997. That is what bipolar type 1 with psychotic features can be like if ignored because of religious dogma and ideology. Left untreated because one needs to buck up and get on with life. So you can imagine my anger, my despair, I'm really not sure what word to use, when this headline came through my news feed 2 weeks ago. Fox host tells caller her bipolar disorder is made up and the latest fad for money. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics behind Sullivan's statement. And yes, there is an agenda. You can read about that on my blog if you so choose. What I want to address is the willful ignorance that Sullivan has in regards to bipolar disorder, and just how little of a clue he has about the struggles of everyday Americans. What Fox News radio host Tom Sullivan had the balls to say to Ong Lee from Sacramento.
Anjali, I'm very skeptical. And okay. I got to tell you, if you haven't been told, I will tell you. I think bipolar is like the latest fad. Everybody and their brother is getting diagnosed with bipolar. And last time I checked, we all have good days and we all have bad. And I don't consider that an illness, and I don't consider it a disability. What were these people called 25 years ago?
Well, you know what?
Before they came up with this bipolar diagnosis. I mean, I just think it's something that's made up by the mental health business just to be able to give people prescriptions and keep them coming in and keeping you paying them money.
Let me tell you what bipolar disorder really is. Bipolar disorder is not some Hollywood trend like steaming your vagina. Bipolar disorder is a disease that wreaks havoc on families and ends lives. Just ask Rick Warren about that. Bipolar disorder isn't just the ups and downs of regular life. It's about bone-crushing lows where getting out of bed is impossible. Daily life skills like bathing, dressing, or feeding oneself cease to exist. Simple chores become like climbing K2 or Mount Everest. You want the pain to end, but lack the strength to drive your car into a tree. Bipolar is not just about being happy. It's about being so manic that you start to believe you can fly. That rules do not apply to you because your very existence is proof that God exists. I mean, why else would I be on this floating rock? 10 minutes later, that exuberance changes, and you slash the shit out of your arms and legs. And yes, I am known by another term. I'm a cutter. But let's return to that day in 1997, because back then, I knew none of this. What I did know is that my faithful brain stopped functioning the way it should, or rather, my maladjusted coping mechanisms faltered. Shrink talk. I became a monster that I no longer recognized, and that began my 3-year and then 5-year road to recovery. The first 3 years after diagnosis were hell, as I spent 18 months of that in and out of hospital, tinkering with finding the right combination of medication and therapy. I lost both my jobs, I was forced out of school, and couldn't figure out how to fry an egg. Stabilization eventually reappeared, going into year 3, but I had to be retaught the basics, or what therapy called activities of daily living. Getting dressed can be such a chore. Because I'm a rapid cycler, my moods can change and will change on a dime. Going out into public was interesting to say the least. Needless to say, I lost my ability to drive and became fearful of social situations. Basically because I didn't know what would set me off. I didn't know what they call triggers were. By year 5, my relationship was over. I had moved to Texas, where a friend gave me time to heal and rediscover myself. Or so I thought. I eventually bounced to Boston for a while, eventually ending up in PA, where I've been for the last 15 of 16 years. It hasn't been easy, and I've had relapses. My most recent was about 4 years ago. The point being, bipolar, and for that matter any mental illness, has an impact both on a personal level as well as a social level. To be an arrogant twit and dismiss it as not a real disability is akin to telling someone who just had a stroke to buck up as they droop to the floor. To say bipolar disorder didn't exist 25 years ago until Big Pharma got involved shows what a fucktard you really are. Thank you, Cash. I'm borrowing your word. Manic depression was my original diagnosis 22 years ago. But you, Mr. Sullivan, may want to brush up on your pre-Hippocratic history to understand more and then follow up with a more contemporary history. It was in the 1850s that the concept that we know today as manic depression or bipolar disorder took its current place in psychiatry. Emil Kraepelin continued in the early 1900s, coining the term manic depressive psychosis. It progresses from there, long before Big Pharma ever existed. The fact that after 22 years we must continue to fight bullshit such as yours is discouraging and downright frustrating. It is why I applaud Ong Lee for having the courage to speak up. It is why I have no qualms about speaking about my health, about my experiences with mental health. It is because of people like you, Mr. Sullivan, and Rand Paul, and Tom Price. Every day of my life I will battle against my disease. Although I no longer take medication, there was a time I could not live without them. It was not because somebody talked me into feeling and thinking this way. That happened in church. But the feelings I have, the mental anguish I experience, the ups, the downs, the terrors, that happened all on its own. There is a bit of caveat to all of this. In order to end this stigma, we are going to have to do better than just, nay, you're wrong, with people like Sullivan. He is a communicator, a manipulator of words and emotions in a field of entertainment, yes, entertainment, that thrives on gut reactions of audiences to get them to tune back in. It's not about being Republican or a Democrat. It's not about being a Christian or an atheist. It's about truth. And the truth of this matter is, bipolar is a very real mental illness that's been around for a very long time. Our beliefs and perceptions do not change those fundamental facts. And Tom, your apology is not accepted. So sit down and shut the fuck up.
Wow, thank you for sharing, Beth. That was very profound and very educational.
I try. But just one thing I wanted to add to that one. Sorry about my voice, but it decided it was going to take a vacation when I was recording. But what a lot of people don't realize is that without the whole argument was SSDI and saying that, you know, people are faking to get on SSDI. Well, I can tell you right now, it's not that easy. I mean, I would qualify if I pursued it, but when this all started with my bipolar, we were trying to actually get my ex on Social Security disability. It took us 7 years.
Yeah,
wow. We had to appeal twice, and if it wasn't for the fact that people are willing to pay their taxes, I never would have gotten help. Because I lost my job, so I lost my insurance. And I was actually told when I went and applied for food stamps and medical assistance, yada yada, that I was faking it. Yeah, I quit a $32,000 a year job, full benefits with tuition reimbursements to get $200 in food stamps and $200 in cash. Yeah. So
that does make sense.
You know, and I do apply only because, I mean, calling into a nationally syndicated show with a prick like Tom Sullivan as the head took a lot of balls. And there has been some backlash. He has done a so-called apology, which I'm going to hit sometime in the next week, because it was really a non-apology. I mean, the fact that he kept repeating made up and big pharma, I mean, he repeated, like, key phrases throughout. So his thing, oh, well, I know people with bipolar. No, you don't. You don't know. You know jack shit. So, but yeah, that article, when I read that, I mean, it took me 2 weeks just to cool my jets.
That article made me really angry. I'm amazed that kind of thinking can still exist in this day and age.
Yeah.
I was born. I spent most of my formative years and most of my professional years in Melbourne, where lithium was discovered. I mean, in 1948 by Dr. John Cade, Australian psychiatrist, who discovered by accident actually that lithium carbonate was an effective treatment for bipolar disorder. And it was the first round of things that actually worked. Back before that stage, they were using less effective things like ECT and lobotomies and horrible things like that. So I mean, for someone now to be talking about bipolar disorders not existing and not being treatable until, quote, Big Pharma, as if it's suddenly or rather turned up in the last 20 years or something in America, is just ludicrous.
Yeah.
I mean, the level of ignorance is just appalling.
Yeah.
Yeah. It all boils down to this aversion they have to helping anybody who is less fortunate in any way. I don't understand that mentality. It's like, oh, you're poor, well, that must be your fault. Well, actually, now I do understand where it comes from. It comes from the religious crap. Because if you're in a bad place, it must be your fault.
Yeah.
You must have done something.
Yeah, and that's what I went through in college, because most likely I've had bipolar my entire life. And I went to college in the mid-'80s, 82 to 86, and I was, as I said, I was literally told that it was a spiritual problem. Well, I could have prayed till I was fucking blue in my face, and it wouldn't have done damn big good. And it progressed from there to where they actually did, for lack of a better term, an exorcism, and it was actually a deliverance ministry, to try to get rid of my demons. Now, bipolar, even in the 80s, when I had this happen, wasn't very well understood back then. I mean, we've come a long way. But 4 years later, I had gone back to try to finish my degree, and the school shrink actually came up to me and apologized.
Wow.
And, there has been progress within the Christian community to some extent, but yet, like when Rick Warren's son died last year, he, said, oh yeah, we're going to increase the awareness of mental illness and try to erase the stigma within the church community. And his whole argument, he took the Ann Kubler-Ross's 7 Stages of Grief and totally changed it, taking out one key thing: acceptance. And he put in like sanctification, and I can't remember. I did a blog post. I was so livid after, because it's like, part of, he was saying it's your body chemistry and brain chemistry, which is true, but that is who you are.
Yes.
I mean, it's part of your identity. You either have to accept the fact, okay, I have this illness. Now, what can I do with it? How can I, cope, for lack of a better word? My bipolar is what makes me unique.
Mm-hmm.
That's who I am. I am not bipolar. I have bipolar, but I don't let it overtake me. And it just is so infuriating, especially coming from fundamentalists with how they treat it. It's just like
the biblical and New Testament idea of Jesus' idea that the lame people were lame because they sinned. So he would put hands on them and, quote, heal them, and then send them away and say, don't sin anymore.
It wasn't.
That was the whole thing.
It wasn't because they fell somewhere and broke their leg, or they messed up the muscles or something. Oh no, it was you sinned, and
they sinned.
Yeah.
And that's the mentality I had to put up with. And my parent, even to this day, my parents don't believe in mental illness.
Mm.
And it took me, and my dad worked for the mental health department. Although he was a CPA, but his whole preconceived notion, I would have to say, was based on his religious ideology. It was all sin. And, I had already dumped that regard as far as being gay, but it took me a lot longer to dump that ideology in regard to my mental health. At the same time I was going through the initial stages of being diagnosed with bipolar, I was also in the process of deconverting. And that's why I said in the beginning, as soon as I realized that, and I think it was towards the end of the first 18 months, between 18 months and 3 years, somewhere in my adult brain, and I was very psychotic. I did some really crazy shit, which is why I ended up in the hospital for 18 months. But one of those days I remember sitting at my computer, and, this was before internet, really. I mean, I was still bulletin boards and news groups, and I was like, holy fuck, God doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, when I came to that realization, when I dumped that religious dogma completely, it was smooth sailing from then on. I mean, I did not have that guilt. I did not have that, oh, it was me. It's something I'm doing wrong. And that's what people have to realize. No, it's your body just not functioning the way it should, and go from there. So
I think that's one of the biggest detriments that religion does, is convincing people that bad shit happens because it's their fault. It's mind crushing, that idea and what that can do to people. And I mean, there are people who get out of religion and they aren't able to really shake that for the rest of their lives, even though they be out of religion for decades. It's so insidious, and that's one of the things that upsets me the most about religions. I was very lucky that I didn't belong to a religion that was big on that kind of thing, but I feel so much for the people that spent, their formative years of life being told that everything that goes wrong is your fault, and you're just not being, you're not sucking up to Jesus properly.
Yeah, that's like you got
about 2 years ago there was a fundamentalist sect in Australia that was causing suicides as a result of teaching, and it unfortunately was in the area of supposedly helping people overcome their life problems. So he was supposedly treating people with mental health problems and causing them to suicide. And there was a royal commission into it, and their right to give treatment was shut down, but not unfortunately before several people lost their lives.
I think I just read that article today.
I
filed it
Ashley,
somewhere.
you had something to add there?
I'm sorry?
I said you had something to add there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I was, everybody knows, I was abused for many, many years, and, I was always taught that, okay, well, if you need help, go talk to your pastor. Well, 9 times out of 10, when you went and talked to your pastor, he always told you it was something that you did wrong. So for years...
You must have provoked him to act that way, right?
Exactly. So for years of me getting abused, I thought that it was because of something that I did or that I was doing. There were so many times that I would sit there and think, what am I doing to cause all this?
That's absolutely horrid. Like those. I wish there's a way to punish people for doing stupid shit like that, but they don't know any better. That's what they're taught to.
Well, I look at it this way. The way to punish them is for people like Ashley, like me, like Ong Lee. The more people that speak out, the better. Like, just about a week or so ago, I posted about Clint Malarchuk. He was a goaltender for the Buffalo Sabres for a while, and he's the goalie that had his throat slashed by a skate in the middle of a game. And I was actually at that game when that happened, and he actually was one of my favorite players. Well, he just recently published a book about his battle with alcoholism and his OCD. And the battle that he went through, and some of the comments in some of the articles were just absolutely atrocious. And the thing is, okay, regardless if you think, he was pandered to or whatever, the fact is that he had the problem, he's addressing it, and he's speaking out about it. And Change to Mind, which is an organization that I support, is actually run by Glenn Close, the actress. Her sister has bipolar disorder, very severe. Medication is kind of helping, but she's in one of those boats where it's treatment resistant, in a sense. But her nephew is the paranoid schizophrenic. And she watched, as they were growing up, all the crap that they went through, and she started this organization called Change to Mind, which I have posted about before. And one of the biggest things for me, and I think why I'm even more willing now to speak out about it, is that I actually got a message from Glenn Close. Okay, all I did was mention her name, her organization, and it was, to me, when we can bring more recognition to mental health and how, religion can make it 10 times worse, 100 times worse, that's important. And the funny thing is, I knew Rosemary was coming on tonight, and when the other night, I just literally just sat down and just started writing this out. It didn't even dawn on me Rosemary was going to be on tonight, so it was kind of a coincidence.
That's cool. We're getting
You're right. We absolutely do need people like you, and thank you so much for it.
You are welcome.
And Rosemary won't know, but I am actually involved with a second show called My Secular Savior, and we try to talk about all of the hard things and life's challenges. We've just done 2 back-to-back episodes on suicide, and we've been really fortunate that we've had people. I mean, we've only done 5 episodes, and number 5's not even out yet. And we've had people approach us and say, hey, I heard what you're doing. I want to talk and I want to tell my story. And we're just thrilled to death about that, because that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to get it so that it is absolutely okay to stand up and say, I have this issue. I need to talk about it. I need everybody to understand, and I want to meet and know more people that have, gone through what I've gone through, and know that they're not alone out there. And that's what the aim of that particular show is. So we're pretty happy about that one, for sure.
Here's an article that came up. I've had this stored, and I just happened to pull it up by random chance. And she's talking about mental health issues, and it's titled "When Christians Struggle with Mental Health," and she goes, I am smart, I am educated, I am independent, and I do not want my mom encouraging me to eat healthy. I don't want my doctor to give me a new treatment plan. I don't want to face my diabetes. I don't know why she brought in diabetes, but probably the age-old comparison at all some days, because it makes me feel frail and inadequate. That weakness scares me. It interrupts my independence and my self-reliance, but sometimes my body falls apart and my mind can't engage to fix it. As much as I hate that when it happens, I note that God gives grace to the humble. Fuck that shit.
Yeah.
That's the mentality that we have to fight, not just as, myself as being one that has a mental illness, but everybody.
Yeah.
Whether you have one, you have family or friends that are that way, I mean, that's fucking bullshit. God has nothing to do with it.
That's right. Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to stir the pot and just mention that there is a range of religious belief, there is a range of Christianity, and there are religions and churches that do not do this.
Correct.
There are liberal churches that can be quite supportive of people with mental health issues.
Yes.
During my practice, when there were people who, for various reasons, needed to keep their religious beliefs and were not in a position to go beyond and look at their doubts, And if you're having you're having a mental health problem, it's not really a good time to be looking at doubts if you don't already have them. So yeah.
That's
what
true.
I would do then is refer them and push them in a direction where they would be getting some support from a church that would work in better with that and compromise. So let's get it in perspective. There are some really, really bad churches, and we all know about those, from at least the people who are talking on the show tonight. But let's also get it in perspective, is that in general, the people who are in religions are there trying to do the best that they can. They may be misguided, miseducated, and what have you. Most of the people are not there to try and harm people. Some of them almost get it right, and we should at least work with those people when we can.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting just about to the end, and I still have to play the logical fallacy for tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then we'll have some final comments and give everybody a chance to shout out and pimp their stuff. So let's do the logical fallacy. And now it's time for logical fallacies for dummies. On this week's logical fallacy for dummies, I'm going to talk about the no true Scotsman fallacy. This is one of my favorites and one of the most prevalent logical fallacies, ubiquitous on the internet and many other places in life. It's just insidious. And half the time people don't know that they're even doing it. The no true Scotsman fallacy occurs when a person is presented with an example that is counter to their argument, and instead of examining this new counter piece of evidence, they modify their argument so to automatically disclude this new piece of information. So an example would be someone who says, no Scotsman eats porridge, and someone counters with, but my Uncle Angus eats porridge. And instead of considering that maybe there's a Scotsman that eats porridge, the original person will say, well, no true Scotsman eats porridge, implying that Uncle Angus couldn't possibly actually be a Scotsman, and therefore the original assertion is intact. As I say, the fallacy pops up virtually everywhere, and it's actually really easy to get duped by this because people have devised more subtle ways of presenting it. I have a couple of clips here that I want to present to you, and you'll see people actually engaging in the no true Scotsman fallacy in much less blatant terms. So these examples are a little more difficult to pinpoint because you may not realize that you're being presented with the fallacy in the first place. Have a listen.
Look, you know, I come from a charismatic background, and I have seen that sort of a thing. But I've also seen a legitimate thing, so it's really hard to look at both sides there.
All you gotta do is copy the legit. You'll never know the difference.
I don't know, man. I think I could tell this was not from God. This was not from God. This woman here, it was like she had just, all the crack she'd been smoking for the last couple of days just surfaced on her. It hit her at one time,
This is a deep-rooted crack.
This was...
that crack with the mouse back.
Tweaking, twerking, and talking about all kinds of... She's been turned to a lizard person, jump out of her skin.
Man, I tell you what, I came out of mine. But in that same church I was in, there was this one woman who started talking to everyone in the church. She was standing down on this in the front there, and she started. Oh, my children! Oh, come, my children, come to me! Oh, no less, and it's loud. You know, she's carrying all this stuff like she's. And I'm looking around at people, you know, see what their reactions are to this. And there's this one black guy about 50 something years old standing next to me, and he's looking at her, and he's like, what in the world? You know, and I'm looking over at him, and he's got this expression. It's like, what in the world? I hadn't been to a church like this before. This is pretty weird, you know. And I'm looking at him, and he looks at me like, you know, and both got this expression on our faces. They're looking at each other and we're silently talking to each other. And he's asking me, "Have you ever seen this crap before?" And I'm saying, "I hadn't seen this crap before." You know,
there's some new crap.
And it was, I'm just telling you, I don't, you know, I'm not here to down charisma and churches altogether, but I think, I know that was not from God. I just know it was not. Something down in my soul told me this is not from God. This is from this person's mentality, their psychology, their mind, or they think that they're speaking on behalf of God. They're not. It's group psychology. It's something. It's pack mentality. You know, you get 5 dogs, and one of them's a bad guy, and he starts chasing around cars and biting people on the street, and the other 4 or 5 go along with it. They think it's great. You know, something like that. But it wasn't from God.
I don't have anything against the charismatic church or speaking in tongues. That doesn't bother me, or the laying on of hands. But
I don't either.
I mean, speaking in tongues could still be. I don't know. Maybe I just don't have that gift. I don't know. But
anyways, but it's just not for you, right? So that's
right. Fine. It's just not. It doesn't.
Right. See, that's the thing is that in the same epistle, it's talking about many different gifts.
I think a lot of it is just not from God.
Now, after these attacks, there's a backlash against Muslim people. And it's so interesting how ignorant people can be. To keep this simple, in my view, and hopefully a lot of other people's view, this was not an act of religion. This is people trying to further their own political agenda, hiding behind religion. But with even the smallest amount of research, you can see that what these people do is condemned by Islam itself. The Quran itself states that you should respond to a hurtful act with a good act. I asked some of my Muslim viewers to react to what happened in France. It's so sad, and I feel the pain of the families, wish them strength in hard times. It has nothing to do with Islam.
So what we have here is a group of Christians in a hangout, and they're talking dirt about other types of Christians that they don't necessarily agree with. And aside from being rather amusing, the main speaker, by the name of Nephilim Free, is making the point that he doesn't think that this type of activity is, quote, from God. Where the no true Scotsman fallacy comes in is near the end, where one of the other participants tries to bolster the idea that these people could indeed be Christians by talking about scripture where they reference speaking in tongues and, quote, other gifts. And Nephilim Free shoots it down by saying, I don't think that that comes from God. In other words, these people are not true Christians. Nice, huh? In the second clip that comes from another fellow's YouTube channel, goes by SupDaily06, as in, what's up? Seems like a nice enough fellow, but he's falling into the trap that's plagued so many people attacks. He's saying that the attacks had nothing to do with Islam, and basically saying that extremists are not Islamic. And that, in fact, was the title of his video. He can't say that because the people who perpetrated the attacks were shouting Allahu Akbar and bluntly stating that their attacks were to avenge the mocking of Allah. We can't say that those people weren't Islamic or Muslims because they said they were Muslims. So they're trying to diffuse the idea that Islam can be violent by claiming that those who are violent aren't actually Muslims. Sorry, folks, it just doesn't fly. Those of you who are on my Facebook may have noticed from a week or so ago a post I made on the No True Scotsman fallacy, and this is a great example of how people use it and don't even realize what they're doing. there was a discussion on Twitter, and a Christian fellow made the comment, "No serious historian doubts that Jesus existed." So there you go. He is saying that if anyone claims to be a historian and they doubt that Jesus existed, they cannot be a serious or real historian. The really funny part about this, the guy who said that, he's a Scotsman. And when I told him that I thought that was really ironic, he had no idea. He's like, "Why is that funny?" And when we explained to him why that was funny, that a Scotsman was using "No True Scotsman," he got mad and blocked me. Huh. Some people just have no sense of humor. Anyway, I hope that clarifies for you how the "No True Scotsman" fallacy rears its ugly head all the time. You can't just redefine your argument to basically sidestep new information that counters your argument. You need to examine that information and either incorporate it or examine it, find that it actually is not true, and maintain your position. But just by saying, "Well, no real so-and-so does that," doesn't work. Thanks for listening, and that was this week's Logical Fallacy for Dummies. And for those of you
supposed to have a British music at the end of something about Scotland, not
yeah, well, I was gonna say, for those of you out there who appreciate men in kilts, you're welcome.
Yeah, I was about to tell you, when I have a near-death experience, that's now been implanted in my brain.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Beth, but it was "No True Scotsman." I thought
Fine.
next time I'll find some hot babes for you, okay?
I can
Hot
appreciate
babes
a
and
well. Yeah.
No true heterosexuals wear a skirt.
Yes, there you go. As my ex-husband, who is historically Scottish, used to say, "It's not a fucking skirt." I'm part Scot too, so you know, I appreciate a good-looking man in a quote skirt. So.
Well, I spent time in Indonesia where they wore skirts, both genders.
Cool. Excellent. And of course, there's always the fable about what might or might not be under the kilt too, but that's a whole other story.
Oh.
But we are actually over time, which is fine. But we should start wrapping up a little bit. So, Beth, where do we find you? I know you tell us every week, but there might be somebody new watching. So tell us, where do we find you?
The easiest and fastest way would be on Twitter at Dune, as in the book Dune, 9998. And then that's connected to everything else, so you can message me there.
Cool. And if you didn't notice from her video, her blog is called Havoc and Chaos. Cool. Ms. Ashley, where do we find you?
Okay, you can find me on the Secular Media Group, formerly known as Dogma Debate LLC. You can find us on Stitcher and iTunes, and you can find us on Spreaker under Secular Media Network. You can also find us at noreligionrequired.com and my Twitter, Miss_Ashley NRR.
Awesome. And please tell Bobby that we're thrilled that he has new equipment. So
I will make sure that Bobby is aware that you are very thrilled that he has new equipment.
Excellent. And Rosemary, where do we find you these days?
I'm just on Facebook, and I'm not hosting anything in particular.
That's okay. And it's Rosemary, how do I say the rest of your name? Lyndall Wen?
Lyndall Wem. Yep.
Wem. Okay.
Lyndall space WEMM.
Excellent. And
I
she
married
writes.
and I kept my other name.
Ah, awesome. See, and Rosemary writes all kinds of cool, profound stuff, and sometimes some goofy things too. So look her up on Facebook, and you'll enjoy reading what she has to say. All right, and as you may know, of course, I am here every Wednesday, and I do want to say before we go to, I'm going to start reminding everybody that second week of April we will be moving back to our Monday nights that we were previously, although we will be starting at 10 p.m. Eastern instead of 9:30. So I will remind you every week until then. But starting today, remember, come April, we will be back on Monday nights. And I also have to plug my other show, which is, of course, My Secular Savior. We just recorded a new episode on Tuesday, and that'll be, I guess that was yesterday, wasn't it? But, yeah, that'll be released soon. And we're at mysecularsavior.com, and you can find us there. We also have a Patreon page that you can find from our website, so if you feel like supporting that show, please do. As I say, we've just finished recording our second episode on dealing with suicide and the aftermath of suicide. And we've had not only a listener-submitted diary story, but a live interview with our good friend Mike. So please check that out when we release that later this week. So, anything else to add, ladies, before we sign off?
Nope, I'm all good.
Okay.
I'm all good.
Well, Rosemary, thank you so much for joining us. We had a wonderful time, and as always, we don't ever seem to have quite enough time, but, you know, one of these days we'll have to have you back and talk some more about wonderful psychology and sociology stuff, because it's awesome. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And Miss Ashley, thank you for joining us again. It's always a blast.
I had a blast as always as well.
Fantastic. All right, folks. Well, as always, I am going to leave us with the Humanist Creed, and join us next week when we're going to have a wonderful guest, Ms. Callie Wright, who is from the Atheist Manifesto podcast. It's a new podcast, and she is going to have a great discussion with us about her story and the struggles of transgendered folk. So it's going to be a great time, and please come back and join us next week. Until then, the Humanist Creed.
I know the truth and power of reason and of rational thinking, and I will use them to my advantage. I know the truth and power of educating myself and of expanding my intellectual boundaries, and I will educate myself. I know the truth and power of vanquishing ignorance, and I will do so whenever the opportunity presents itself. I know the truth and power of morality without supervision, and of true and accurate righteousness. I know the truth and power of obliterating tyranny, be it intellectual, emotional, or philosophical, and will work toward that goal whenever and however possible. I know the truth and power of human ingenuity. I know the truth and power of human compassion, and I will be mindful of the welfare of others. I know the truth and power of equality and fairness for all living things. I know the truth and power of the importance of our families, our friends, and our fellow men and women. I know the truth and power of human stewardship of our lands, our waters, and our skies, and I will try to act to preserve our environment. I know the truth and power of the sciences of mathematics, of physics, and of chemistry, and of the important role of these disciplines in understanding the workings of this cosmos. I know the truth and power of the rejection of all notions or beliefs, that reside in the supernatural or the superstitious, and of those notions or beliefs that we are not supposed to be able to explain. And I know that these rejections are necessary for humankind's survival. I am a human being with a free mind, liberated from irrational influence and from unreasonable dogma.